Postscript Media, podcast for a changing planet.
I'm going to reject learning that was not that was false news, and I'm going to continue believing because that was my Christmas present to myself.
It was Andrew Tate's Christmas present to you. This is Hot Buttons, a show about the future of fashion and culture on a changing planet. I'm Christina Binkley. I'm a contributing writer at Vogue Business and the Wall Street Journal. This week, it's a new year and a new chance at making real progress toward a sustainable fashion industry. We'll look back at 2022 and make a few predictions about what we think 2023 may have in store for us. Hey, it's Christina. If you're listening, you're probably just as curious as I am about what businesses are doing and what more they should do to confront climate change, which is why I recommend listening to the Climate Rising podcast from Harvard Business School. Climate Rising gives you a behind-the-scenes view into how some of the world's best and brightest business leaders are confronting climate change. Hosted by Harvard Business School professor Mike Toffel, Climate Rising dives into the challenges and opportunities that climate change presents to innovators and businesses, including some of your favorite brands. You'll learn about how extreme heat is impacting the supply chain needed to produce our food, and how the World Wildlife Fund is helping for-profit companies take bolder action on climate change. I'd especially recommend their episode with the co-founder of Allbirds as they discuss how the iconic footwear brand is decarbonizing fashion one shoe at a time. So go ahead, listen to Climate Rising on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell them I sent you. Is it too late to avert the climate crisis? How is our fossil fuel usage impacting everyday life? These questions may seem scary, but former UN Chief Christiana Figueres believes there's hope. In her podcast, Outrage and Optimism, she and her co-hosts will break down the latest climate news, introduce you to the incredible activists making a difference, and maybe inspire you to play your part in averting climate change. Find Outrage and Optimism wherever you get your podcasts. Rachel Kibbe of Circular Services Group is in New York. Rachel, how's it going?
It's going great. Christina, how are you?
I'm good. And the CEO of Thrilling, Sheila Kim Parker, joins us from upstairs in South Salem, New York.
Hi, Christina.
We're just going to keep tabs on your location in your house forever.
It'll never get old.
Well, maybe. We'll
just to us.
To the audience, but not to us.
To the audience. Yes. The new people will be like, what are they talking about?
Are they still talking about this? Yeah.
Oh, well. You guys, I just had to talk about this. This happened last week, which seems like a million years ago, I guess, but Vivienne Westwood, R.I.P. I thought she would never die.
Right. She had that kind of energy and spirit where it was timeless. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so
What a
true.
loss. What a loss.
What an incredible, I just can't believe, I can't think of another fashion designer that did as much to impact fashion, and yet actually a lot of people think of her more for her activism, I think.
That's right.
Than her design.
Her design was almost a means for activism, or it was a means for activism.
Yeah.
I knew that, she originally had that store in London, that sort of from which the punk movement sprouted, but
right.
I wasn't sure. I didn't know how that related to the Sex Pistols. And the Sex Pistols it wasn't that the Sex Pistols started the store, it was that the star started the Sex Pistols. And the punk movement came out of that, and all of her activism came out of that. And it's just, I don't know anyone who has influenced fashion and activism and music all at once and at the same time and like interchangeably as much as she has.
For her whole life.
For her entire life.
She adopted rap ultimately, she was like into it. She was just like into the whole. But when you think of her fashion, I remember one time years ago, I was speaking with her partner, Andreas Kronhalder, and he mentioned, I was curious because there's so much Renaissance and medieval design in her clothes that you almost don't notice all that bodice work. And this was early on when I was writing about fashion, and he sort of changed the way I saw designers' motivations, because he said that she got obsessed with that. She was super into haute couture and, this handwork and really close, careful work. But also he said she was she didn't like her breasts. She felt that they were too small and that she wanted to enunciate them. And those bodices, that's what they did. And that sort of generated her interest in going that direction. And I thought that's one of the reasons why I so like women's wear that's designed by women, because there's something very personal in it that often does solve a problem. It might be their personal problem and you might not share that issue, but there's always something deeply personal about those designs.
That's awesome. Rachel mentioned her boutique, which was started with Malcolm McLaren, her co-founder of the boutique, and the manager of the Sex Pistols, ultimately. And I love that it started out as a vintage boutique. Like, she sold a lot of vintage in the beginning, and then evolved into her own designs. And then, I was reading some of her early comments, and I think she had some really interesting early instincts about sustainability. She said things like, "I think it's ecologically friendly that my clothes are expensive." And she said, if people like my clothes, it's good if they don't buy them for 6 months because then they'll be able to afford them. It was just, and I'm sure that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but it is interesting. She is tying that idea of, clothes shouldn't be cheap.
Right.
And it is something that, you should, save up for and buy slowly and don't overconsume. The other thing that I love about her is that she found success. She was successful throughout her life, but in many ways she established mainstream success later in life. Because I could not believe she had her first runway show in 1981, which was called Pirates, but that was when she was 40. And then she won Designer of the Year at the British Fashion Awards in 1990 when she was 50, almost 50. And I just think that's awesome.
That is awesome and rare.
Yes, sadly rare. Yeah.
She initially, like even in 1981, when she was 40, she still felt sort of like an outsider and rejected by the press. And it wasn't until the 90s that she really started becoming a mogul, and she reached $45 million a year in sales. And she, it was interesting too, because obviously she's totally anti-establishment, profoundly anti-capitalism, really outspoken about wanting to empower individuals to have a voice and fight against injustices, not just climate change, but everything, including human rights, protesting, actively protesting capitalism. And then she became a dame in 2006. Her earliest clothing was totally rejecting the establishment of royalty, and then the queen just loved her. She could the more crazy she got railing against the throne, the more the throne sort of embraced her, but for good reason too, because she, her label is actually the symbol almost identical to that of Harris tweed, which is a type of tweed that came out of, I believe, Scotland, and was almost, the industry for it was almost dead until she revived that industry. And because she did, she asked if she could borrow their symbol, and that's become her logo, essentially. She put some her own flair on it, but she's done a lot of good for her country and her area of the world.
I couldn't help but sort of be startled, but I don't know why I was startled by the Sourcing Journal has a story this morning saying that Adidas is dropping the Stan Smith Balenciaga collaboration, that they already sold it into stores, and they're just going to not deliver it. And I thought it was curious. I don't know. Did you guys notice this in the story that it says they didn't make an announcement? They just quietly told the retailers, sorry, we're not going to do this. I was sort of curious about why they would not. I mean, they made an announcement when they dropped Kanye, right?
Right. You're curious about why they wouldn't announce it or why they dropped it?
Yeah. Why such a soft sort of just trying to back out of it and go, oh, nothing to see here, as opposed to saying, we are discontinuing our relationship with Balenciaga because they are scandal prone and...
Right. Maybe requests from Balenciaga to not make a big deal out of it?
Yeah.
Terms of the breakup, potentially?
That would show a lot of respect for Balenciaga and caring, really, right? It would have to be caring.
Yeah. I don't know. I know that Balenciaga is trying to, we all noticed their Instagram post and how they deleted all of their past posts and they're not allowing comments. And I don't know about you guys. I'm kind of over this scandal.
Over it.
Do you still, do you think we should all still care, Christina?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not going to, I do. I think not just because of one ad. I think we should all still care because it took them 2.5, 3 weeks to collect themselves and figure out what they needed to do. And I think that that's a sign of poor leadership. And as a person who's interested in investors and investable companies and things like that, I like to invest in companies that have outstanding leadership and that aren't swimming and scrabbling and drowning in their own messes. So I'm more looking at the leadership of the company, and that's not just Demna. That's are they making wise decisions? Their first attempt to blame everybody but themselves, which lasted like a week, and involved suing a poor contractor,
right?
Who is, probably can barely make his rent. So it's more, it's a management issue and how they handle it. I think if they had come out and admitted that they made a poor decision in that advertising campaign and taken responsibility for it. And then I guess I had totally forgotten about it until they posted that Cristobal Balenciaga, was that Christmas or New Year's? They posted on their Instagram a sort of a series of videos of Cristobal Balenciaga when it was his, haute couture brand from 1960 to 1967, which has nothing to do with what the brand is today.
Right.
And
completely
I thought,
different.
What?
Right.
Are you now going to pretend that you aren't what you are now?
Right. They're like, remember why you love us and why our brand has meaning.
Like, none of you remember this actually, and we hardly do either, but look over here.
Right.
I mean, the history of the brand has been so far removed from the roots of Balenciaga for a long, long time.
Right.
It went through various different owners before it even became what it is today. So I think it's a little hollow. It's not like this brand has been so deeply rooted in its roots up until Demna. It's a little, I don't know, it feels once again a little thoughtless.
So Christina, for you, what do you think that the brand could do to win your trust back?
Oh. Now I'm going to have to say something really controversial for a lot of people, but
Excellent.
I don't think that you can. I don't think you can do that with the current team in place.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they know how to do a total rebrand overhaul. And I'm not just talking about, I'm not passing judgment on the clothes and the products that they're making. Like, I just, I'm a fashion journalist. Everybody should make what they want to make and what's selling. Fine.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. I just think you've shown such a long series of bad judgment. Like, you have to do a lot of good judgment really fast. I guess maybe if they, we haven't, it's been over the holidays. It's been, 2 months since this all happened. It's not easy to do an overhaul of to do your listening campaign and go out there and work with child protective charities and things like that. But I think they need to get out there and do that pretty visibly very quickly and not just have that be quiet and behind the scenes. I think it needs to be pretty loud.
Not just an Instagram post of...
Yes. Well, and the fact that they still have their comments turned off.
Yeah.
I mean...
cowards.
I don't know. But anyway, so to say, Bella Hadid posted a photograph of herself from that same office campaign that had been the second part of the scandal.
That was strange.
Well, the comments. Did you guys look at the comments to Bella?
Yeah.
People were just
not good.
Oh my God, take it down. It's a pedophile brand. I mean, just really ugly, nasty accusations that tell you that the feelings are still alive. Now, that was a couple weeks ago that she posted that, but it's interesting. She has not turned her comments off.
She's not.
So, nor taken the post down. So, at least she stands by her.
She has bigger cojones.
Or less. She might be afraid of any contractual obligations she has to have that photo up. That's what I'm assuming.
But she didn't.
is.
I bet she doesn't
Yeah.
have contractual obligation to keep the comments on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
As a matter of fact, I would think they would want her to take the comments.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That was weird.
They're probably asking her, "Kay, could you turn them off?" Actually,
Turn this down a little bit.
Filter those. At least delete some of the worst ones.
Oh my god. Okay. Do we anything else on top of your mind? Just shall we move on to the section of the show where we thought we'd sort of reflect a bit on things that happened last year? And by the way, I have to say, as we were pulling this together, I really like the fact that talking about this made me realize that a lot of good stuff happened in 2022 in fashion and
Absolutely.
sustainability, and more broadly, just sustainability in general. So let's start by, well, we have to address the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is not a fashion story, although there are a lot of fashion stories happening with it, with Ukrainian fashion designers doing
Absolutely.
amazing things. But outside of blowing the hell out of that poor country, and I sometimes can't even imagine how they rebuild all that, or have you guys seen any estimates on just the carbon that's spewing in the atmosphere from all of that war?
Oof.
It must be just, I can't even imagine.
Did we talk about this? I don't remember if we spoke about this last week, but I encourage everyone to watch David Letterman's interview with Zelensky. It's really, really incredible. It's done 300 feet underground in a train station. He went to the Ukraine to interview him in front of a largely military audience. And it's profound and it's amazing. And he is, I know a lot of people are saying this, he's like truly Churchillian for like the way that he is able to speak and convey a very sort of proletariat message. I am one of you. And, but also lead is like, and be funny. And he's getting interviewed by a comedian who I'm sure he worshipped. So, and continues to worship. It's great. He speaks in Ukrainian. Letterman speaks in English. I think there's a translator maybe in the ear. And it feels like they're both speaking the same language.
Wow.
Amazing.
Okay. You mentioned that before, and I meant to look at it, and I forgot. So I'm really glad you reminded me.
Yeah.
'cause
Same.
I want to
It's
see
worth
that.
it.
I watched. People in Ukraine were posting videos of themselves watching his New Year's Eve address. Did you see any of those? There was one with a group of soldiers in a bunker somewhere with this truly pitiful and sad-looking Christmas celebration with like a little bit of tinsel and some Tupperware with cookies. And they were standing around and they're watching on somebody's phone Zelensky's address, and it's these big, studly Ukrainian soldiers,
yeah.
tears streaming.
Yeah.
They're like rubbing their noses. I mean, it's like,
He can move a crowd.
yeah.
he has superhuman instincts. He's not normal human instincts. Just somewhere like from the divine or somewhere else. He has a vision for how to move and how to act that are beyond what a normal human could usually do in those circumstances. It's really incredible.
It's really true. When he walked into Congress, I found myself trying to zero in on that entrance he made when he walked into the room with all the senators and representatives in there. And I realized that there were people like just reaching out to touch his arm. Like he was in some crowd in the public, you know? It's like the entire
Totally.
U.S. Congress, like, fangirling, fanboying.
Yeah.
I feel like I am still trying to come to grips with how cool is the Inflation Reduction Act.
Absolutely.
Which sounds like a completely
I
nerdy
wish it
thing
had
to
a
say.
cooler
It's got the
name.
worst name possible,
I know.
but we love it.
Yeah.
It's not a cool name.
Yeah.
But
Such a weird name.
that helped get it voted.
But it worked.
Yes, exactly.
But it worked, so-
Whatever gets the job done.
Yeah, I mean, it is without a doubt the most aggressive climate legislation in the country's history. No, it has $374 billion behind it by many estimates that will unlock trillions in additional private capital investment. We're already seeing that happen. A bunch of plants around the country have been announced. I'm hearing people talking about bringing way more U.S. manufacturing in under it, possibly more mechanized I'm hearing textile manufacturers talking about manufacturing textiles in the U.S. It's cheaper to cut and sew in Mexico or Guatemala, but we can use the technology to produce the textiles here. So that's very interesting. It's long-reaching, this act. It will definitely have an impact on reducing emissions. I don't know if you guys ever gotten all tingly about legislation before.
I can't believe. I feel like I still pinch myself that it actually passed. I literally can't believe it. It didn't. It was far from certain, and in fact, it was everything but dead. And then there was that surprise comeback.
Okay, we talked about this a couple times on the show this year. Big moves at the two COPs. We got a loss and damage commitment at COP27 in Egypt, which I think was like the biggest thing that happened at any COP. I mean, it wasn't really on our radar for going to be the big thing, but it turned out to be. But there was an important biodiversity commitment at COP15 in Montreal.
I think that was bigger. I almost
you think that was bigger?
I think it was more successful. I think it was more well received.
It got some headlines. I guess you're right. That was the one that the U.S. didn't sign on to, and I think that I feel like that probably clouded my feelings about its success. I don't know. I still don't know why we didn't sign on.
Well, we claim, me neither, but I do know we claim we have the equivalent.
Whatever that means.
Right.
Well, anyway. So, I mean, I don't know. Anybody want to sum up? Are we like really optimistic for the next COPs coming out of these ones or no? Oh, Rachel shook her head quickly.
No, I just don't. I don't see a whole lot of, especially in the like carbon space. It just seems like there are more people representing the lobbying interests that are not there to have productive conversations about what we can do to meet our Paris Climate Accord goals in the next less than 10 years that we need to basically save the planet. I don't see like drastic movement coming out of these very large conferences that take a lot of money and carbon to get to.
So like Greta Thunberg said, it's more blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Whatever Greta says, that.
Yes, cosign.
Yeah, let's take a moment of silence for her murdering of Andrew Tate.
Yes, that was amazing.
That was amazing.
Twitter is still alive, but Andrew is not.
If there's anybody on this planet that missed that, Andrew Tate is a kickboxer, is British, but he was living in Romania because he was apparently in trouble in the UK or something for, he calls himself a misogynist, so you can only imagine. But so he tweeted at Greta Thunberg some boasts about his huge carbon emissions for all his cars and asked her to let him email her so he could tell her more. And she responded, let me see. So she was like, yes, please tell me, email me at smallpenisenergy@getalife.com.
Yeah.
Small dick energy.
Small dick energy at
getalife.com. Yeah, which...
and the internet rolled over and died.
Yes, exactly.
And then he got arrested.
Right, because of his response to her tweet. It was pretty great.
And then he posted a video, which was the saddest video ever, talking about how he doesn't recycle pizza boxes and he was smoking a cigar.
Well, I have this feeling watching the news at COP that you're right, you guys, when you say that there's too many lobbyists in there and then sort of everything just slows down and nothing is happening.
Yeah. But let's talk about what was good this year about fashion.
Well, look at all these European and Australia. I mean, Norway passed that act and started hammering fast fashion brands and brands that are greenwashing, not just fast fashion, but a lot of them that the ones with their greenwashing. I mean, greenwashing became a super hot button issue.
Yeah.
I think more so. We've been talking about greenwashing for years.
Yeah.
But I feel like it reached, I don't know if it's a climax because I think it's going to be more so in 2023.
Yeah.
But people are not having it and governments are not having it, which is a really good thing to say. I wish I could say that in the US, but the UK Competition and Markets Authority launched an investigation into ASOS, Boohoo, and George at Asda scrutinizing their green claims. They have a green claims code now in the UK, which holds brands or, is appearing to begin to hold brands' feet to the fire. The French passed the climate and resilience law. I think that goes into effect this year, right? At some point. I don't know a lot about it, but it's, again, trying to hold brands' feet to their fire. The European Union passed its unfair commercial practices directive. I think that kicks in another year. It gives brands some time, but I'm already hearing signs that European brands are paying attention and realizing they have to come to the plate. I think that's one of the reasons, frankly, why that group of Italian brands that we talked about 2 weeks ago have come together to form a coalition, because they know they need to support, they need each other's support to meet the demands of the EU. There's a lot. I mean, I don't know. You think I'm wrong to be optimistic about what's happening?
Yeah, it was funny. We were sharing that poll done by Vogue where consumers apparently are not optimistic about sustainability. Right?
Or they were negative about the progress made last year. Was that was that the framing?
Yeah, negative about the progress made or ambivalent. But I actually, I was thinking about this a lot, and actually, I think it's a good thing. Because while I disagree with them, I think it means they're interested.
You disagree with consumers feeling negative.
Yeah, I mean, having been in this for over 15 years, I think we've made more progress than ever this year. I mean, and I'll name some of the things I think are indicative of that. Ooh, but I think consumers are now hip to what a mess we're in.
Right.
And of course, when you stick your head out, out of the sand and see what a mess we're in, you're like, oh my God, this is awful. Fix it.
Yeah.
But there's so many complexities to it, as that's why we have this whole podcast dedicated, and so parsing out those complexities and understanding what is progress, what's not, is very confusing. And they're also seeing all this there's legislative action being taken by consumers and against brands for greenwashing, and so that is putting a microphone where there wasn't in a more significant way, and drawing more people into the fold to understand sort of the crimes against the environment our industry commits. But that said, I think the industry is finally facing its demons in a way that we haven't before. I mean, for years and years, we would have conferences where we would say, this is a problem. There are key indicators that this is a problem. We need to discover the levers to pull to solve for this problem. And that happened for a decade, that kind of talk. And it was exhausting. But
Good
now,
on you that you kept going.
I mean,
that's a long time to keep going.
It's a long time. It's a long time to keep going. And it's only these small wins that have kept me going, and lots of people who are working really hard to keep momentum. And finally this year for me, when I see $250 million commitment from AII, H&M, $283 million a year now to launch decarbonization programs. We had ThredUp reported 3x growth from 2021 to 2022 in the number of resale launches there were. 2021 had 35 resale partnership launches announced. This year we had 121 resale launches. And I think there were more, but those are just who they're reporting. And then, Vestiaire is banning fast fashion. ThredUp is now charging for its clean out bags, calling out Shein. These are actionable steps. These aren't just conferences where people are saying something needs to be done and we need to understand more about what the problem is. People are putting their money where their mouth is. Is it enough? No. Is the progress slow? Yes. Is it very not transparent? Yes. But it's something. We can point to something. We can point to a lot of things. And policy, too. I mean, we've got 2 bills. We had 1 bill passed in California. We have 1 bill on deck in New York, the Fashion Act. We have a federal bill, the Fabric Act.
Yeah.
This would have been, if you would have asked me 2 years ago if we'd have one bill that was passed for labor rights here in the United States, a federal bill that would improve, that would onshore manufacturing and improve labor conditions for garment workers here, and a New York-based bill that has global implications on sustainability in the fashion industry. If you would have told me 2 or 3 years ago that this was going to happen, like these policy efforts, I would not have believed you. I would have said in the next 10 years, maybe.
Kirsten Gillibrand, are you listening? Will you come on Hot Buttons and tell us about this?
Yeah, the Fabric Act. She will. I think
she will. I hope so. I hope so. The Fabric Act, we have to talk about that more because that's big. And that's another one that talk about onshoring more fashion production. I've spent the last 15 years of my career talking about fashion designers manufacturing overseas, trying to design overseas. It's a nightmare for everybody. It's a nightmare for the ateliers, the designers. It's no good for the consumers.
It's
no
expensive.
Good for the earth. So
really expensive.
Crazy. And we have the capacity here by far. We once had a massive apparel industry. But I want to ask you something. When you were talking about all this, that you've been doing this, Rachel, for 15 years, So when you're like sitting on a plane chatting with the person next to you and you tell them what you do, or when you go into a party where you don't know people and they say, so what do you do, Rachel? And you tell them.
That's the hardest
Has
question.
the response changed from like when you did that 10 years ago and when you do that today?
Oh my gosh. So at my house the other night, I had a New Year's Eve party and someone was telling me about some sustainable fashion thing. And I was like, well, actually, that's my job. And they're like, oh, really? And I have people telling me about sustainable fashion before I tell them I work in it, which is like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I said, there's this thing called ethical and sustainable fashion. It's a movement. People would say, that's not a thing. But that's not, you're like, how does that even, no one cares. And now people tell me and I say, oh, well, that's my job.
That's awesome.
Which is great.
And then they fangirl on you.
I don't know. I don't even know if they fangirl. It's just so big. It's like, oh, of course, if you work in fashion, you work in sustainability.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
so cool.
I think that's such helpful perspective about, putting all the efforts and achievements last year in perspective, and just in terms of the long-term perspective. There was so much progress accelerated last year. I'm curious, Rachel, for you, do you feel like that translates to some of the things that you hope to see or that you think we will see this coming year?
Mm-hmm, I do. I think that things are really moving now. We have a lot of smart people. We have the financing efforts, the creative financing efforts that are starting to go into this, that are a lot of which we probably haven't even heard about yet, that take a while to sort of formulate and get together. I think we're going to start to see some really big... the fact that Patagonia gave away its company, they were probably planning on that for a really long time. Like those kinds of like, whoa. Like these people mean it. They know there's a target on their backs. There is consumer pressure. There is regulatory pressure. There is existential and non-existential real climate pressure. Like our communities are disappearing. Being in the business of making a product right now is one of the most tenuous businesses I think you can be in, because you have to stand by that physical item. And I just think the gig is up and people are just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, agree completely. I think for me, when I think about, this year coming up ahead, I don't really have predictions about what will happen because I feel like it's just so hard to predict what's going to happen. But
right.
But I have kind of wishes of things that I hope will happen. So I think on the resale front, I agree, Rachel. It was exciting to see that ThreadUp report about how many more brands have now adopted resale as part of their business models. 121 brands now. And I think that will accelerate this year. I think almost every brand and retailer is already discussing how, if they haven't already announced a resale strategy, they're planning to. And I think you'll see even more, almost every brand and retailer announce some sort of resale strategy. But what I hope for, the other piece of that ThreadUp report is how many items are offered across these resale programs. And they have about 146,000 items offered up for resale across the 121 brands, which is about 1,200 items per brand. And that's tiny. Each retailer makes, millions. Collectively,
right.
Globally, we create 100 billion new items of clothing approximately every year. So this is a drop in the bucket. And what I really hope for is for retailers and brands to move more deeply into resale and to make bigger commitments to it, to supporting circularity and to make resale a more fundamental part of their core business. So that's my wish. I think it's a great starting point. They're all experimenting and they're piloting, but I think so far it's pretty surface, and I want it to be deeper.
Actually, let me ask you a question, Sheila, about that. And maybe this goes back to some things we've talked about before between like consumer and regulatory pressure. But like, how do you hold brands' feet to the fire to do so, to get deeper into this, and not just use these partnerships as a marketing campaign?
Yeah, I mean, I think I loved Selfridge's announcement where they said 50% of our revenues within 10 years is going to come from repair, resale, refill, or rental. And I think you really just need to, from the top, make a commit. I think that it's as simple as that. From the top, it has to be a commitment that a core percentage, and it has to be a top line revenue goal, is going to come from this program, and then you figure it out, and then you work with your lieutenants, and you figure out. There's a lot of operational and logistical complexity, as Rachel knows really well. But I think that you have to make a commitment like that from the top, from the board, and from the C-suite, and then the rest of the organization has to figure out the logistics to support it.
Leadership.
That's what it is. Exactly right. It's just leadership.
I love that.
The other thing I was also excited about, I feel like people are being held to task for greenwashing. Google published a study last year that 72% of North American executives agreed their organizations overstated their sustainability efforts.
At least they're honest. That's the honest ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, 99.9%.
Right, exactly.
And then
that goes back to the whole thing. What I didn't say when I was giving my little optimism speech is like, it's also, we have to, or someone, the public can't be totally accountable for this, but there has to be accountability in commitments.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of big commitments, but then what?
Exactly right. So I think words will continue to matter this year, and I agree with you, Christina. It wasn't the climax last year. I think that's still yet to come in terms of accountability for greenwashing, but I think that just continues to accelerate. I hope. I don't know if we're 100% there yet, but I hope people will take ownership for their clothing waste, and I think rather than thinking we can dump our clothes off of at a donation center. That we either hold on to clothes for longer, we give them a second chance, we try to work with them, tailor them, upcycle them, or we try to give them to a friend, or we try to sell it ourselves, and make sure that sale happens ourselves. And I think, taking ownership over our own clothing waste helps reduce our consumption cycle, because you start to take control and real accountability for your purchasing decisions. So that's my last hope for this year.
Wow, it makes me wonder. I'd be curious to hear what you think about something that I started to do lately. After the pandemic, or in the last year or so, I've just completely changed the way I want to dress, and I've been getting rid of a lot of clothing that I've been wearing some of it's expensive stuff that I purchased for my work to wear to fashion shows and interviewing executives and things like that. And I'm just not going to wear it anymore. And I had the Real come over several times, and I sold a bunch of stuff that they were willing to take, but there was a lot of stuff that they weren't. And I was thinking, I should do Poshmark or this. And I finally thought, poor Goodwill, they're awash in fast fashion. I should give them this stuff. I know I could make some money selling it, but it's a huge hassle to do that. I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to give myself an excuse for taking the lazy way out and giving it to Goodwill, but I have given a lot of really expensive clothing to Goodwill in the last 6 months. Is that bad?
No, the biggest question I get is, what should I do with my clothes? And to be truthful, whether you're mailing it somewhere or giving it to someone, it's all the same routes. Someone's going to try to sell it. Whether it's whether their profits go to supporting job programs, or they're a for-profit public company, they're going to try to sell the good stuff, which is good for everybody, that this good stuff gets sold and doesn't go to the trash. Okay. But then the stuff that's not great is either going to be turned into rags and or exported to other countries. And some of the good stuff will too. And whatever can't be sold is someone's trash generally. Some of it will be downcycled, but we don't have recycling yet really at the scale we'll need, and that's the answer. So whatever's most easy for you and for your life, try not to throw it in the trash. Try to give it another life. Try to get some money for it if that benefits you, but don't feel bad if you're sending it to ThredUp or giving it to Goodwill or sending it wherever, because the routes for everyone is pretty much exactly the same.
Okay, so it's not a bad thing. I mean, I don't have a lot of fast fashion to give away, but by the way, I also give to Out of the Closet. I don't want to just say Goodwill because those are my two.
Is that like a Dress for Success?
No, it's similar to Goodwill, but it's supporting LGBTQIA, right? Causes.
Yeah, and they have good, and they do. I mean, honestly, and I do it because of that, but also they're actually really well run. So is Goodwill. I mean, they're two. I think they do a good job with having locations and merchandising them and things like that. I have no idea how they decide what they sell and what they don't sell. I mean, I do worry about, because we read so much about that they get more than they can deal with and that they're having to sell things off to rag sellers and whatnot.
I'm going to make a slightly nuanced addition to kind of what Rachel said, which is, I don't know if, I've definitely engaged in dumping bags of clothes at Goodwill. And I think donating high quality clothes to Goodwill is always great because they're currently awash in very low quality clothes. And for people who are shopping there for need, it's great when they can get access to high quality clothes. So, it's not really about transferring guilt on us because it's not really our fault. It's really, we got to hold companies accountable for producing so much stuff in the first place. But, I do think that there's an element of being able to take a massive amount of your clothing, put it in a bag and just dump it somewhere. There's an element of it that's like conscious laundering. Like
I totally agree.
There is, I think it's uncomfortable to admit that, but there is an element that is, that it makes us feel better. We don't have to deal with it. It's a hassle, and we just want someone else to deal with it. And what ends up happening, as Rachel, I think, wrote or said recently about, you're really just conferring on somebody else how to manage your waste. And that's and I think it is a pain to sell your stuff individually or to try to figure out which friend or family member is really going to use it, or to try and figure out, okay, how can I rework this item so I might actually wear it? That is a pain. But I think adding more friction at the end might help us also add more friction at the beginning and maybe potentially be more thoughtful about what we consume.
Beautifully put.
Yeah. Well said. Which comes back to, if you buy less, then you don't have to figure out how to throw it all away at the end.
Right, exactly.
And your friends will want it more if you don't want it. It's just more valuable, like in the, or you'll be able to sell it.
Stuff.
That's true. So I thought this was interesting. Pinterest put out a predictions for this upcoming year, and they said for the last 3 years, their predictive trend report, 80% of their predictions came true, which I was shocked by.
What?
I know. I thought that was really
I've never predicted it.
But you know what? Actually, if you think about the way people use Pinterest, I am actually like, that makes sense because people use Pinterest to plan future purchases.
Yeah.
Right? Weddings, interior design, et cetera. So I thought actually maybe it is true. I don't know. But I thought it was one of their predictions that people will mix more vintage into home decor. They said 850% increase in eclectic interior design vintage search on their platform, and 530% increase on mixing modern and antique furniture. So hopefully we'll see more of that trend. And then I thought this was fun that they said they predicted Y2K fashion is coming back with a roar in 2023.
I don't know if there are any trends coming around anymore. I'm completely overwhelmed. I look at trend reports and I'm like, did I read that 5 years ago, or is this the one that just came across my desk? Right. I can't even tell anymore. So, 10 million micro trends means there's no trends. Didn't we talk about that a little bit? I think we were sort of discussing that. There's
so many trends means no trends. And then did you guys see Pantone's color of the year?
No, what is it?
Okay, it's Viva Magenta.
It's super red.
Yes. They called it a boundary-less shade that is manifesting as a standout statement.
Do you guys want to, I don't know if you want to say anything. We don't have to do this if you don't want to, but do you want to say anything about your personal goals for 2023?
Do you have a good one, Christina?
I guess I have a personal goal, and that is to buy very little new fashion at all. And if it is, it's going to be a really amazing piece. I'm going to take all the money that I might have spent on other things and do that. So that's part of it. But also, I realized that I have a husband and 2 children that I've also been shopping for years. And I want to instill in some of the sort of the lessons that I've internalized out of talking to the 2 of you for the last 6 months, 9 months, however long it's been. Not long enough, but I've enjoyed and I've learned so much from the 2 of you. And I want to spread it in my family. I don't want to be proselytizing on sidewalks about it because that'd be weird. But I think I have to get that out more in my family. Some of whom still buy fast fashion.
Mine were more, were not kind of related to the topics of this podcast. My personal ones are about, I'd like to prioritize health and mental wellness for myself. And also I'd like to say yes. I think, I often feel very stretched and time starved, with kids and work and everything else. And I actually want to say yes more to connecting with friends and acquaintances. And being, I think that, our time is precious, and I learned that more and more every year. And you really want to be present for the people you care about in your life. So those were mine.
That's a good one.
Those are beautiful. I think mine is I want to work more efficiently. I want to focus on the growth of my business so that I have time to have a work-life balance. I've spent a lot of years kind of very busy, very surviving. And I think I've gotten to a place where I'm really excited about the work I'm doing, the podcast, the policy work. I have some great clients, and I'm thinking about what I would like that to look like as it gets, as it grows, and what that would enable for my outside life, because I am 100% a workaholic, and it doesn't work for me anymore. I think to your point, Sheila, life is so short, especially as you get into your 40s. You've got all these babies being born, and you have a lot of people getting sick and passing away. And it really gives you this window of, there's just a few years we have to do the things that we love with the people we love. And a lot of times it's not work. And I think that when you think about sustainability is the most sustainable thing you can do in your life.
Right.
Be a full human, which is hard when you work in our industry. Fashion is cutthroat and nonstop. Sustainability is the same, maybe worse. And you live in New York, and you can get trapped in the rat race. And to what end? I mean, it has to be, I think when you work in sustainability too, you're also a public servant in a lot of ways. And to be a public servant, you cannot be burnt out constantly.
Yeah.
You have to be available otherwise, because the best laid intentions can go really wrong. There's a lot of ancillary consequences to doing sustainability in the wrong way.
Well said.
It sounds like you guys are, I don't want to use the term quiet quitting because it's not at all what you guys are doing, but stepping back and balancing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to be skipping the next few weeks of the pod, and just kidding.
Well, I'm going skiing next week. I don't know about
our producers, what?
You guys just had time off.
Christina, I know you have a really, you have a burning hot button this week. We'd love to hear more about it.
It is on fire. And I want to say that I never watch American football. I am completely a soccer fan. You guys know that. But I I was looking at my Twitter feed last night, and I saw all of this stuff coming across it saying that a player that honestly, I don't follow football, so I didn't know him, but a player named Hamlin, who's a safety for the Buffalo Bills, had been under CPR for 9 minutes, was on the field of the game. And I walked out of the room and I said to my husband, have you ever heard of this guy and what's going on? And my husband was like, what? And turns on the TV. And we then watched like 2 hours of what is like a horror show of this game with the Hamlin tried to tackle, he's a defensive player. He tried to tackle an offensive player in Cincinnati, the Bengals, and apparently it looks like at the very moment of when they impacted the guy's chest or helmet hit Hamlin's chest and caused a heart attack, and he died on the field, and they brought him back. He's now in the hospital, and last we've heard he's on a ventilator. And, the game was ended. Nobody knows how they're going to work all that out. They did the right things as much as they could. But as I was watching and reading and thinking about, there was another player whose name I forget, somebody who has had 3 concussions since September. The second one that he had 2 months ago, he went down. He'd been cleared to play. He went down and went into this thing that's called fencing maneuver or something, where his brain caused his hands to go up like this, and in these weird like splayed things. Apparently when you have severe brain damage, your hands will freeze like this. So he's on the football field like this. And they cleared him to play 2 weeks ago, and he landed again and got a 3rd concussion. What is this some sort of gladiator thing? I mean, I know I'm not the first to say this, but it's very frustrating to me that we have a culture that is supporting people being injured.
It's awful.
And killed, potentially.
It sounded like they didn't make the right decision for too long. In the game that you were referencing from last night, it sounded like I didn't watch it, and but I followed on social media what was happening. But it sounded like it was a little bit too long that they delayed, and they actually tried to restart the game until the players and the coaches
refused.
Yeah, they said absolutely not. And it's wild to me that I definitely wouldn't let my sons play. Absolutely not. It's hard for me to imagine people putting profits over people's health and lives, but here we are.
Yeah, they seem to be encouraging these guys. I mean, people were saying that the other player, the offensive player for Cincinnati, was feeling terrible and about this. And I've now looked at the replay of what happened a billion times, and no, I mean, they both did what they're supposed to do. It was an accident. One was trying to gain a few yards as an offensive player, and the other was trying to tackle him. It didn't look that crazy what happened. It's just that they're trained to put their bodies at risk.
The game is designed, basically. They were playing within the game's design. The problem is the game's design. Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, a lot of people think it shouldn't exist as it is today, right? Just because of the brain injuries alone.
Right.
That can happen not from extreme accidents, but just concussions over time.
Yeah. Great, good hot button, Christina.
Yeah.
I don't think we can follow that.
We can't follow it.
That's all for the show. Please support us by following us on Twitter @HotButtonsPod and now on Instagram @HotButtons.pod, or send a link to friends or colleagues and go to Apple or Spotify and give us a rating, please. We're also streaming on Amazon Music, and we really, really appreciate your support. If you want to email us with story ideas, send a note to hotbuttons@postscriptaudio.com or leave us a voicemail at our call-in line. It's 508-622-5361. So So give us a call. We really like your calls. Hot Buttons is hosted by me, Christina Binkley, Sheila Kim Parker, and Rachel Kibbe. The show is produced by Postscript Media. Our senior editor is Ann Bailey. Our engineer is Sean Marquand. Stephen Lacey, Scott Clavetta, and Rachel Kibbe are our executive producers. Postscript Media makes podcasts at the intersection of climate with culture, politics, business, and tech. Postscript Media is supported by Prelude Ventures. Prelude is a venture capital firm focused on climate solutions across energy, food, agriculture, transportation, logistics, and advanced materials. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch up with you next week, and Happy New Year. I have to say, mentioning Trump, did you guys see he called a press conference and invited all the press to Mar-a-Lago last week? And the photograph of him and Melania standing in front of the press that came looked like two people from OWN.
Really?
Like that was it. Yeah.
It looks like what?
Nobody showed up.